just see here, waiting for it to come on to YouTube. Let's see, is anybody here? Hello? Okay, what is going on? Hold on just a second here. Open live chat and new window. um, Hold on a second. I can't tell if this is the old chat or if this is the new chat. Hold on, guys. What is going on here? I don't like the setup on YouTube on my page is all different. Let's see. Okay, I think we're live. I don't know what on earth is going on. My chat is totally different. So we're just going to go with it. And here we are. So lots of people on right now. Everybody's here early. I guess no, it's 8:31. I'm a minute late is what it is. So Yoko says, "Haven't you done this many times already?" Yes, Yoko. Well, let me explain a little bit about me and technology. It's a very tense relationship that we have, and every single week, every single time I turn on anything, actually, computer, TV, vehicle, you name it, things go on the fritz. It's just chaos. So yeah, it's amazing that I even have a YouTube channel. It really is. So let's see who all is here today. We have lots of people. Adrian's here. Hi, Adrian. And Overcoming Understanding, who I was talking to earlier on Instagram. And Benny, who is saying, "Yay, I got the information or the notification on my phone too. That's exciting." That's how it should be, right? Like in theory. Traveling Wolf is here. He says, or she says, LMAO, Dana, go tech stuff. Right. We've got Opeth, Opeth dude from Melbourne, Australia. So, wow, far away. BBR says, "We love you, lady. That's why we're here early. You have been a lifesaver for all of us." Trisha says, "The live stream brings me joy." And Hannah is here from Scotland. Wow. So I'm so glad that these live streams are so helpful for so many people. That's awesome to hear. And honestly, I am the one that just turns on the camera. You guys make it what it is. So thank you guys for supporting everybody here and for all of the feedback and the support and the awesomeness that is the whole community. So I appreciate you guys. M. Fisher says, "Hey everyone, I encountered my first covert narcissist this week. Aren't I lucky?" You are. This probably isn't your first one. It's the first one that you've noticed. They are out there. There's no shortage of problematic people in this world. But I will say that there's no shortage of really good people out in the world too. It's kind of what we notice, I think, by and large. And I will say too, after you experience narcissistic abuse, it's really, I think, easy and normal for people to see your eyes really become open to just how many problematic people there are in the world. And that can be really scary, and it can make you feel very paranoid. And a lot of that's just really normal. So, you know, just kind of realize that it's not you, it's just that your eyes are opened to it. You know, I think a lot of us go through life thinking that everybody's like us and that we don't go around maliciously hurting people, and it's a really a jarring realization that there are so many just dangerous and destructive people out there. So, Traveling Wolf says, yeah, Fisher, I feel for you. How did you handle it? Great question. So, M. Fisher, how did you handle it? Oh, okay. So, M. Fisher says, yeah, first one I've noticed, he'd known her for 20 years. What a disappointment. So, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because a lot of these problematic people, and again, we don't need to necessarily go around, a lot of people, get myself included, get hung up on wanting to find the label for them, right? Trying to figure out, well, are they just really dramatic, toxic, highly problematic people, or are they narcissists? And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, right? It's just kind of like trying to figure out which kind of poison you are drinking. Like, it's not good for you, whatever it is you're ingesting. So but it's good for us to set our scanner on kind of problematic people in general, because there's no shortage of them. And the more we can spot people that are problematic, the more we can stay away from them. But however, the flip side of that is, the more in tune we get with what exactly is problematic, the benefit to that is, the flip side is, the more in tune we get with what feels good. So the more we can spot, problematic behavior, the more we can spot positive behavior, and then ideally start, gravitating more towards those people. I think for a lot of us, for a variety of reasons, our scanner is just not set broad enough, right? So we've probably been tolerating a lot of really problematic people for a long time in our life. I know I had been, and not realizing it, just kind of thought, well, everybody had the capacity to change and everybody would want to change, right? If they knew their behavior is problematic, then they would want to change. And then kind of realizing, oh, no, that's not how that goes. So what else is going on with you guys? Anything else new and exciting? Christy says, and that's a great point. I've always had these gut feelings, but no one sees it, so they try to convince me it is just me. Well, now I know it's not me. Yes, great point. So there was a book that we read for the book club a few months ago called The Gift of Fear. And the author of that book, his name is Gavin De Becker. And if you go to my website, narcissistsupport.com, there's a tab on the website for the book club, and you can read all my notes on it. Super interesting book. And one of the points he mentions is on kind of sensing those red flags, and how, we are our own best judge of kind of when we're in danger. And I would agree completely with that. So other people may not sense situations, but if you do, because, you're going to be picking up, we're all going to be picking up on certain clues that other people might not sense for whatever reason. But always go with your gut. Always, 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 always. It's very rarely, if ever, wrong. I can't really think back to any time where my gut instinct about a situation or a person was off. It's always been absolutely right on. So let's see. Let me shrink down this chat. This is so weird how this chat thing just changed. All right. Yes, thank you for reminding me. Overcoming understanding. So we were talking. Um, oh gosh, there's so many good questions. Let me stop the chat, and then I'll come back to this real quick. So overcoming understanding, and she also has a channel. She had I hope this is okay that I'm giving a little bit about our conversation. I won't give too much, but she was asking me about my channel and kind of what I've experienced with everything. And because there's been a handful of people that have started a channel on their own experiences about narcissistic abuse and kind of their recovery, and I think that's absolutely fantastic, and I support you guys 100% in it. I hope that you can learn from my mistakes, kind of across the board, like with everything that I do in my life that doesn't work out as I plan, but especially when it comes to your safety. So with my YouTube channel, there were a lot of things I wish I would have done differently, and things I just was not prepared for at all. And I feel very ignorant, very naive about a lot of this. I went forward using my real name, which was a huge mistake. I would not do that again. I've had to call the police twice now on two different people, and I've had some very unsettling moments from people, and I expected trolls, I guess, on my site. Like I knew people would say hateful. I guess I didn't really expect hateful. I expected people just to say mean things, and it's hard because you're being vulnerable. You're talking about things that are very personal and near and dear to you, and for somebody, a total stranger, to come out and attack you and call. And so we were talking earlier about people saying, "Oh, well, you're the problem. You're the narcissist, or what's wrong with you?" And hearing those kind of comments, because that's kind of like the worst thing that you could call a victim of abuse is an abuser, right? It just cuts it back then. It just cut to the bone. And I mean, I can't even tell you how many days where I was so overwhelmed with the site and with moving forward with it, and can I actually do this, and am I healed enough to do this, and who am I to be doing this, and it just doing a YouTube channel, I think, of any kind, especially if it's about something that you're passionate about, you're really putting yourself out there, and it's really easy to get rattled by it. So if you are doing a YouTube channel about narcissistic abuse, I would encourage you, don't use your real name. Be prepared for lots of people to be commenting and emailing. I can really no longer even respond to comments. I don't even check my YouTube comments anymore. Not my comments, my YouTube messages. I have so many different social media accounts. I can't keep up with all of them. I combined probably get close to, I don't even know, 500 messages a day. And so it's absolutely overwhelming, and it's intense. It's intense because my situation, I went from not only being a survivor of abuse, but from also working in a domestic violence shelter where I was working with about 14, the maximum 14 women, and then kind of a handful of children at any given time, to getting hundreds of people emailing me. It was just, in knowing that I couldn't respond to all of them was an incredibly, a lot of guilt and a lot of just sad. It was a lot of sadness and heaviness, and it's been a very intensely emotional experience. But so kind of, I guess, know that if you're planning on doing a channel, and it's it's probably going to kick up a lot of self-esteem issues, and a lot of kind of self-doubt. I know it did for me, and it's a lot. It's good in a lot of ways because it makes you examine things that you might not examine otherwise, and it's also good because you get a lot of feedback from a lot of different people on your experience. The personal growth that I've had from my channel has been absolutely amazing, and I don't think I would have gotten it any other way. And it's been from everybody's feedback, even some of the trolls and the haters' feedback, really bringing things into my awareness that I wasn't seeing. So there's pros and cons, but at the end of the day, be safe and reach out to other people that are YouTubing and starting up websites around this topic, because it is really intense. And just at the end of the day, always err on the side of caution. And you know yeah, so that's that. So back to you guys' questions. Okay, Adrian says, I'd love for you to talk about codependency and boundaries. Yes, so I just am starting my series on codependency. I haven't finished up my series on narcissists, believe it or not. I still have about 20 or so videos left in that series. I kind of hit a wall with all of this. It's because it's just so much negativity. And even though I feel like I've healed from it and I've gotten on the other side of it, it's amazing how much it's a lot of heavy stuff. So I kind of hit a wall emotionally with all of this, probably back in November, maybe. So I'm going to continue to finish up my series on the red flags of a narcissist, but I'm also going to be doing this around the same time I'm doing the series on the red flags of a codependent, which started a few days ago. So I just put out the intro video. It's something I'm super excited about because it is a lot more like forward momentum, right? And so understanding the red flags of a narcissist and the red flags of problematic people is, that's a good first step. I think we all need that because we all need it. We're all kind of, I feel like a relationship with a narcissist, it's like getting hit, like a hit and run accident. Like we're dazed and we're confused and we don't know what happened. And we're kind of just wandering around, right? Like trying to figure out what on earth we just went through. So I think that's definitely important for people to be able to spot problematic behavior. But then the next step is to examine, was this an event for us or is this a pattern? And so here's the thing. So like for a lot of people that go through abuse, it tends to be a pattern. They have a pattern of picking problematic people. And I know I did, but I didn't see it as a pattern. I just kind of kept thinking, well, because it wasn't so cut and dry. It wasn't like one after the other, after the other, after the other. It was sort of like one problematic person and then one that wasn't so problematic but wasn't just right for me, and then one really problematic person and then like one that wasn't so bad. So I didn't see a pattern there, and for a long time. So we're going to be talking a lot about, boundaries and standards and kind of the impact of a person's childhood on this, and, just everything having to do with narcissistic relationships and kind of our different points of attraction and people that are attracted to us, kind of what vibes are we giving out, and what are we attracted to, which is of course more important because if we're keeping these people in our lives, examining why and how. Yes, we were manipulated, but then also how are we manipulated? How did this happen? And I really think this has everything to do with the whole empty buckets and the whole, them being able to exploit our vulnerabilities. So we're going to talk a lot about that. Like with anything else in life, I'm not saying by any stretch that I have all the answers. It's just going to be, us starting the conversation about it. And my guess is that series I'm hoping is going to be, is going to really yield a lot of these great conversations that the Red Flags of a Narcissist series has kind of given birth to. Because I really think the power is in all of the side conversations on this. It's people being able to hear other people's stories and seeing elements of their own reflected back at them. And that's what's so powerful in all this. This is why I recommend support groups. And, you can join mine. It's on my website, narcissistsupport.com. There's plenty of them on Facebook too. I always recommend people join a handful and just kind of see which groups resonate the best with you, because, different groups resonate differently with different people. So yes, but it's going to be an exciting series. The goal is for me to put out a minimum of one video a week. I'd like to be able to do closer to like 2 or 3 and really just kick this series out. And then after that series, I plan on talking a lot more about kind of overcoming the challenges with PTSD. So, which is very common. A lot of people that go, most people, I think probably everybody that goes through some form of abusive relationship, there are elements in different degrees of kind of PTSD type symptoms that happen. So we're going to be talking a lot about that and sharing strategies and what worked, um, and that's going to be super exciting too. So with all that said, Kevin asks, what is a good plan for therapy to overcome CPTSD? Which is the complex post traumatic stress disorder. My therapist is a good listener, but she doesn't provide much in terms of a long term plan to overcome my past traumas. So that's a great question, Kevin. And there's a wide variety of different therapies out there for CPTSD. Probably two of the more popular ones. There's one called EMDR, which is, I want to say like something electromagnetic desensitization, EMDR, something or other, and it's different tones. Sometimes it's lights, and it helps to kind of reprogram the brain. A therapy that you can actually do at home is one, I want to say it's called EFT. It's the tapping therapy. So if you look on YouTube look up EFT or tapping therapy, you can see it. It takes about 5 minutes to learn. It's really easy and it's really interesting. It's the concept behind it is hitting like different meridians and then stating different statements. And it sounds really strange, like how would that work? And I'm not quite, I mean, I've read the science behind it. I still don't fully understand how it works, but I know that it does work really well. I work with some therapists who absolutely swear by it, and even some psychiatrists who are big fans of it. They've seen a lot of massive shifts in patients doing that EFT therapy. So, and it's pretty quick and it's fairly instant. So you can look that up on Google, on YouTube, and go from there. You know, outside of that, I think mindfulness is absolutely huge. Paying attention to your emotions and not fighting them, realizing that they're there. They're there. Emotions give us messages, right? Especially like PTSD kind of stuff, because it's our brain's way of trying to process trauma, and it tends to get stuck in these loops because, especially if something doesn't make sense. So like for regular PTSD, right, if a person's at war, for example, or they experience a more cause and effect type trauma, like they get in a bad accident and now they're afraid to drive, right? Or they were at war and now the loud sounds, they have flashbacks, and they have a problem with loud sounds or with crowded places, or with certain smells, or kind of what have you. That makes more sense for the brain. That's why their PTSD is more, centralized. It's more surrounding those like cause and effect kind of things. Of course, there's a ripple effect to that, right? Like paranoia, flashbacks, nightmares, wanting to isolate. Those things are kind of universal for PTSD, but with the complex PTSD, if it's abuse related, abuse is generally ongoing, and abuse, most people, when they think of abuse, they think of physical abuse, which again, that would be more cause and effect, right? But a lot of abuse is more verbal, it's more emotional, it's more psychological. And so if you're in it, like most people don't even realize that they're being abused for a really long time. And so they just know that they're in a really maybe toxic or uncomfortable or dysfunctional type dynamic or relationship. And so it's hard for the brain to link up cause and effect, especially if this is something that we were raised with or we've been in this relationship for a long period of time, because it's the new normal, right? So it's hard for the brain to process all of that, and that's why it's can be really hard for survivors of abuse to move forward after that. But realizing the reason you're stuck is it's your brain's way of trying to make you safe. So There's a lot of guided imagery on YouTube. Those are fantastic. There's what's his name? Jason Stevenson, I think is the guy that I really. There's a few of them, but he's one of them that I really like. So any type of like stress relief, anything that you can do that's self-soothing, that's calming to remind yourself that you are here now. Right? It's a very grounding, very centering. You are here now. You are safe. You are safe. You are safe. And just calming, just very centering can help your brain to just relax, because it's that fight or flight mechanism that's activated, and it just keeps going and going and going because it's trying to process something, but because there's no direct cause and effect, it like doesn't compute. And so yeah, it can be hard for the brain to release that. Doing visualization too can be really helpful. So if you find yourself getting upset or, ruminating about something, to tell yourself, you know what, I'm going to put this down. I'm just going to put this down for a little bit. I can pick it back up at any time. But for right now, I'm going to put this down and I'm going to go have some fun. Or I'm going to go watch a movie. Or I'm going to kind of go do whatever. Ideally, have fun. Right? But just letting your brain know it's okay. It's okay. Like, we don't have to have all the answers right now, but we can still move forward with our life. So we're just going to set this down for 20 minutes or for 2 hours, and then we can pick it back up again. And then just practice kind of setting this down. And then if you, choose, okay, we're going to pick it back up again, then we're going to set it down, and then we're going to pick it back up, and then we're going to set it down. So your brain just can just gradually calm down at the pace that your brain needs. So I hope that helps a little bit. Yes, Teresa says, I would love to hear more about positive psychology and moving forward inspiration. So that's what I plan on really focusing on. So all of, the red flags of a codependent series, and I'm going to be doing a whole series on post-traumatic growth, which is actually the opposite of post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's not something that's widely discussed, but it really is kind of the core of what or the focus, I should say, of what positive psychology is. And so that's something that people tend to not talk about, but most people that have had these really amazing experiences where they, even to an extreme where they feel like they've become enlightened or have had just massive positive changes in their life, it tends to be because they hit rock bottom. Like they either tend to be really suicidal, or some major event happens in their life, and it just kind of gives them this clarity, and they're able to use this event for like the higher and their own personal higher and greater good, and then the higher and greater good for other people. So we're going to be talking a lot about that the whole moving myself from PTSD to PTG, that post-traumatic growth it's really, I so love that. I so love that. Cause I know, I mean, I feel like I've been there myself. I know it can be done. It's just, opening up that discussion and examining like where different people are stuck. And I think with this whole community here, getting people to have these conversations, realizing that they're not alone, and that your life, I think just even knowing like you can go through something like this doesn't have to totally break you. Like I say all the time, like one of the best things about having your life blown into a million different pieces is that you get to choose which pieces you can rebuild with. And you really can have an even better life after this. So I think a lot of people that are really healed from this often say, these experiences, myself included, like, I don't want to repeat this, but the personal growth and the awareness that I gained from it, I don't think I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it. So, but it can take a little while to get there. So there's different levels, I think, of understanding and healing that go along with with going through an abusive situation, and a person has to be at a certain place and a certain level of healing, to where they're ready to move into that space. And but it's exciting because I think, you know, just having these conversations can really is really really huge. So Kevin is saying too, he says, I feel like I have to talk through the experiences for anything else to help as well. I do a lot of therapeutic activities, meditation, stretching, breathing, etc. Yes. And so I think that that's really common. A lot of, pretty much everybody that myself included, everybody that I've ever come across in the different support groups and at the domestic violence shelter and, all of them, it's it's like it's like getting in a hit and run accident, and we're all trying to make sense of it. And especially if you experienced a lot of that gaslighting and you know where you're being blamed for everything, it's a lot. And so there's going to be waves of realization as you move forward, where you just kind of realize, oh, that wasn't true, and that wasn't true, and that wasn't true. And you're going to be learning a lot about yourself and your perception of the relationship and of yourself and of this other person, and the different dynamics that were at play are going to continually be changing as you move forward. And so yes, there's definitely that period of a person, really wants to understand narcissism or sociopaths, and they research a ton about it. They want to talk about it a lot. This can, I think we've all been there. Like, this can really burn out people's friends and family because they don't understand, right? And they're tired of hearing about it. So this is another reason support groups can be so good, because you can talk about all of this stuff 24/7 and as much as you need to, and they're there. Other people get it. They get why the temptation to go back and forth. They get all of the mix of emotions. They understand a lot of this. So I think the kind of step one with these relationships is just getting that validation of what you went through. Really, it really was painful, and it really was crazy making, and it really was as bad as you thought it was. And then kind of step two is understanding what happened, and that can really take some time. So definitely talk about it. And a lot of therapists might say, okay, they might want to kind of move forward and say, okay, but now let's focus on you, or like they kind of want to move forward with that. And it's okay to just say, you know what, I need to keep talking about this. I'm still trying to just understand what happened to me. Like, I'm not staying stuck in victim mode. I am trying to process what on earth just happened to me, because I think a lot of people out there, even very well-intended therapists and other people, they don't understand. And even if they've been in an abusive relationship, they weren't in your abusive relationship. And every single abusive relationship is different. So, you know you best. I think that's really the big gift in all of this, is learning to trust yourself, learning to trust your judgment. You know you best. You know your situation best. You know yourself best, even though it might not feel like it, right? Like, you might feel like, well, Dana, I don't trust my judgment at all. Like, and I don't know what's going on, and I'm a terrible read with people, and I don't know. That not knowing is kind of the first step in knowing. So learning to just slow down and just breathe, and starting to pay attention to how you feel. How do you feel? If you're feeling, any type of like uncomfortable emotion, right? Like irritation, frustration, sadness, depression, anxiety, anger, rage, all of these emotions are there. They're there for a reason. They're there to kind of get you to slow down and examine what's going on. And generally, those uncomfortable emotions mean that there's been some sort of boundary violation. And it's not necessarily like a major one, right? But it's those emotions surface when something needs to be brought to our attention. So either a conversation needs to be had, right? So let's say, for example, if you're in therapy and you're wanting to talk about what you went through, and the therapist says, well, you know what, we've already talked about this for 10 sessions, and how about we talk about something different? If you're feeling, that anger or that frustration or something surface, maybe your therapist is right. Maybe, it's okay for you to talk about something different that session. But if you're feeling uncomfortable, it's okay for you to say, you know what, I'm feeling, and say how you're feeling. I'm feeling really irritated and really not heard and really stuck. And like, I still want to talk about this. And so maybe that means that you guys kind of negotiate and say, you know what, I really would like to talk about this for 5 more minutes, and then we can switch to a different topic. Or kind of whatever that means. Like, but paying attention to how you feel about things, and paying attention to how you feel about people. So like what we were talking about earlier with okay, so here, like Trisha makes a really great point. She says, I think if a relationship causes ongoing emotional pain, that's a big red flag that something isn't right. Yes, right? Hands down. So, you know, healthy, nourishing relationships don't cause ongoing emotional pain. Like, odds are, if you're experiencing a lot of ongoing emotional pain, this is very dysfunctional. And in any type of relationship, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be where people don't see things eye to eye. The difference between an abusive relationship and a healthy relationship is the approach on how people handle those things. So, a healthy relationship, there's open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication. It's being able to speak your mind and not walk on eggshells. So it's being able to say, you know what, hey, like, this really hurt my feelings, or I'm this is kind of what's going on with me, or these are my concerns, or and using a lot of I statements, right? So like, I'm feeling that, I'm feeling really uncomfortable, or I'm feeling really confused right now, or I'm feeling really hurt. And then the other, letting the other person bring up whatever they're going to bring up, and then, kind of addressing it. The difference with unhealthy relationships is that there's the opposite. There isn't open, honest, sincere, and solutions oriented communication. It's not open, it's closed. It's not sincere, it's manipulative. It's not honest, it's lying. It's not solutions oriented. It's designed to get power and control over the other person. So if you're feeling like you are walking on eggshells, if you feel like you can't talk to your partner about things, if you're continually wondering to yourself, am I too sensitive? What's going on? If you're feeling not heard, if you're feeling ground down, if you're crying a lot, if you're depressed, if you're taking anti-anxiety medication, right? These are all signs that something's off, and it's a good idea to slow down and examine what's going on. So, because these are not normal. Okay, so let's go look at some more questions here. Yes, okay, great point. Overcoming Understanding says sometimes the abuser makes you feel like it's your fault and that you're too sensitive. So, very correct, right? That's a lot of what they do, and that's the whole projection part of it. So, hold on a second. So, it's very common, and that's very crazy making, right? And so, like, a lot of people have a hard time with piecing that together. So I get a lot of, and I don't know if you've seen in comments my videos or in the support group, where people will say, well, but how do I know that I'm not, that they don't, how do they know that they're not the narcissist, right? Or that they're not the problem? Because odds are they have been told that time and time and time again by this abusive person, that they are the abusive one, that they are the liar, that they are too sensitive, that if only they would change, that everything would be perfect. But I think a good way to kind of, and that it's hard to tell, right? Like, well, who is the problem here? But narcissists project their stuff. And so if you're concerned where you're walking on eggshells, like you can't bring up anything, and if other people aren't telling you that you're the problem, if kind of there's smooth sailing with a lot of other people in your life, but then all of a sudden this one person is telling you that you're abusive, that you're manipulative, that you're the problem, you know, but you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, like, I think what I just experienced, like, their behavior was manipulative, and I feel like they were being abusive. If there's confusion there, then it's them. Like 9.99% of the time, it's 99.99% of the time, it's them. Because one of the first signs of problematic behavior is confusion. So if you're feeling confused, it's because it doesn't compute, right? So narcissists and manipulative people, they never think that they're the problem. So there is no confusion. Like it's everybody else's fault. It's like a weird primitive emotional defense that they have developed, and it's really sad and it's really tragic. But there isn't any introspection there. Whereas with the person that's experiencing that abusive behavior, when we experience that, we take a step back and we're like, well, whoa, like what? Like, wait a minute. And then there's that confusion. And if you are wondering, here's another kind of way you can tell, is to ask yourself, well, if I really was being abusive, if I really did, if I really was being manipulative, am I willing to honestly and sincerely examine my behavior, and am I willing to correct it? And if the answer is yes, then there's no need to worry, because then you can examine your behavior, you can do what you need to do, and then you can move forward in correcting it, right? So, but yes, they do a great job at spinning things around. So that's kind of how that goes. It's like they might provoke an emotion, right? Then deny it, then spin it around, and then now all of a sudden they're the victim and that you're the abuser, and it's absolutely crazy making. So that's the pattern. That's what they do. I don't think that they I think sociopaths realize that they do that, but I really kind of feel like a lot of narcissists don't. It's just a very, very strange defense mechanism that they have. So, okay, great point. Music says, my narcissist used to say, I don't feel safe. I need to feel safe and loved. Is this common for them? I never understood why he said things like that. Maybe to get me to try harder. Yeah, I think possibly. Um, it's I think it depends on the context, but they'll often say the exact opposite things, right? So they might say what you're feeling. So if you're feeling like, well, wait a minute, like, really? You don't feel safe? You don't feel safe? Because, boy, I don't feel safe. Like, anything I bring up, you're instantly wanting to break up, or you're threatening to leave, or to cheat, or to kind of do whatever. So, and then if you're on the receiving end of that kind of stuff, it's sort of like, well, that's so weird that you don't feel safe and loved, because, like, it, again, like, it's just strange, right? But that's the projection, a lot of the projection stuff, like, if being accused of, they think that we're cheating, right? And then all of a sudden they start going through our phone and email, and here we are, where we're like, oh my gosh, like, that's terrible that you feel that way. I don't want anybody to feel that way. And then we kind of think, well, maybe it's given their past, or kind of what have you. And so we're bending over backwards to make them feel safe and loved and secure in this relationship. But then really we find out later that they're the ones that are cheating, right? Or that they say, hey, I don't feel safe. And here we are bending over backwards to be like, I really want you to feel safe and loved and secure. And then they're the ones that are rocking the boat the whole time. It's what they do. It's very strange. So, okay, Ginny says, Dana, I have a question. Can long-term gaslighting and abuse make you have memory problems? Also, why do they not allow you to talk or express yourself? If you do, you're arguing. I am told not even to talk. So, yes, okay. So gaslighting, it can definitely make a person have memory problems. Um, More so, I think it can make a person question that they have memory problems because it really erodes a person's sense of sanity, right? Like if you know, you're like, you know what? I could have sworn that they told me that, you know, I don't know, that their first car was red. And now they're telling me that their first car was blue. Like I know what they said. Like and it's just it's those little inconsistencies that don't match up, right? Or if they say, again, like, or if they tell you, oh well, the company Christmas party is on the 23rd at 8 o'clock, and then the 23rd at 8 o'clock rolls around and you're ready to go, and then they tell you, no, no, I said the 24th at 8 o'clock, right? Like things like that, where it's just it makes you question your sanity. So, and that's normal, right? Because you've got a person that's messing with your sanity. So it takes a while for a person to trust their judgment after going through a lot of gaslighting. And so now, why do they not allow you to talk or express yourself? I think there's probably a variety of reasons for this, but I think by and large, they don't care because they're not about narcissists are incapable of having a relationship of any depth. I mean, a person to them is really kind of the same as a chair, as a ketchup bottle, as, I mean, and that sounds terrible to say, and I get how incredibly painful that is, but they don't attach like regular people. So, while we want to have, this open, honest, sincere, in depth, communication, they just don't care. And because it's all about them, and if it's not a conversation they want to have, then we're arguing, right? Or if we disagree, we're not allowed. Partners of narcissists are not allowed their own opinion. My laundry's done. They're not allowed their own voice. Narcissists are all about gaining power and control over other people and over the situation. And so, it's just, they're very insensitive that way. It's all about them. So that's why. And it's crazy making for us if we can't acknowledge that and just realize, like, our, a normal person, a quote unquote normal person's, you know, 100%, if we give and give, right? If we're giving our 100% into something, our 100% might only, or I should say, a narcissist's 100%, like their top level of connection, it might be a normal person's 10%. So realizing they just can't attach like regular people for whatever reason. And so if you're going to stay in that situation, just kind of realizing that and realizing that this has nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with you. Your love, your understanding, your compassion, all of this, it can't fix them. It can't save them. It can't anything. Like they can only do that for themselves. And it's incredibly tragic. And this doesn't mean that we, have to be mean or hateful or any of these things. It just means like understanding that everybody has their limits, right? And like that's just kind of where their limit is, and then not expecting any more. And that might mean if making peace with the fact that their 100% is our 10%, that, and if we want more than that, which most people would want more than that, that we either need to get out of that relationship and get into a different relationship, or if we're going to stay in it, realize that they're only going to fill our cup 10%. And so we need to get that, we need to feel validated and feel heard, and to get that connection in other ways. So maybe that's through hobbies, maybe that's through friends, volunteering, finding work that's fulfilling, these kinds of things. But to realize we're barking up the wrong tree if we're going to them, and that's their max. Like that is is, that is what they can give. So I hope that that kind of answers your question. Um, and I think too, it's not only necessarily narcissists, but it's kind of just unhealthy people at different levels, right? So like not everybody is going to be our kind of person or your kind of person, and that's what's so important, is to really get to know yourself and realize, okay, who do you vibe with? Like who do you really connect with? And are those really intense, deep kinds of conversations where you're up until 2 a.m., are they really important for you? And then to find other people that really value that kind of connection too. Because everybody's different, right? And so it's knowing yourself and knowing what you need to feel nourished. Oh gosh. Okay, let me see. Ellen says, how is it even possible to find a healthy relationship after surviving a narcissist? Well, I think it's completely possible because the benefit of having a narcissist in our life is that it can bring a lot of potential issues to the surface, right? So, for example, with my own life, okay, after dating, I dated two within like a 5 year period. I had two serious relationships within a 5 year period of time. And I mean, I just kind of thought, like, statistically speaking, like, what were the odds? But actually, they're actually pretty high. So, especially if for me, I just had this habit of glossing over red flags. I just kind of thought, well, nobody's perfect. And, they weren't huge red flags. But, a red flag is a red flag. So it doesn't have to be huge in order to cause destruction in your life. But there were a lot of lessons that I gained from that. I really learned to trust my judgment. I really learned the importance and kind of what having healthy boundaries and standards looks like. Really learning to value myself. And so I think when we have a narcissist come into our life, it's sort of like a fire that we can no longer ignore, especially if we've had, a kind of a history of problematic people in our life. So if we have a problematic person in our life, then it's a good time to slow down and examine, okay, there's this fire, right, that's going on, but has there been other areas in our life where there's smoke that we just have had gotten used to being around a smoky environment? And kind of examining our friendships, examining our career, examining our relationship with ourselves, examining all of these things, and so a relationship with this, like with a narcissist or a problematic person, it can be a really good thing in a way, because there's always an upside to every single thing, right? There's always a gift in everything, and trying to find what are the gifts in this, and making this work for you. So and a lot of people have gone through this too. I think that's another thing is, you know, I think when we go through something like this, we tend to feel very alone. Like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this happened to me. What was I thinking? I feel so embarrassed. I feel so ashamed. I feel so stupid. I feel so alone. I know for me, I didn't want to tell anybody. There's a lot of these feelings that go around an abusive relationship, and you know realizing that you're not alone. Like lots and lots of people have experienced this, like a lot, like probably I would say, I don't even know, my guess is at least half of the population. So um it's, yeah. So just knowing that you're not alone, and that other people that you're going to be out dating have probably experienced them too, or they have them in their families. Um, so, it's all about your boundaries and your standards, and paying attention to how you feel, paying attention to your intuition is just so, 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 so huge. Because once you get that in line, and once you really start, getting in tune with what feels good, what feels bad, the different warning signs, how your body starts signaling to you when things are out of whack. There's physical ways and then there's emotional ways, right? So like physical ways might be, are you having muscle tension in your neck and in your shoulders, and does your back hurt? And are you having headaches? And are your there, there's no shortage, of symptoms out there. Are you having pain? Are you having inflammation? Are you, depression, anxiety? Are you wanting to isolate? Are you wanting to sleep all the time? Have you gained a lot of weight? Have you lost a lot of weight? Are you drinking too much? Are you eating too much? Are you, all of these things? If anything's like out of whack, it's your body's way of coping on some sort of level, like physically or emotionally. And getting that in tune is incredibly powerful. And kind of there's a ripple effect to that. So like over time, it's going to be interesting because you're going to really get to the place where you really know yourself. You know it feels good and you know it feels bad, and you act accordingly, and other people around you they're not going to get it because they're so used to doing what they feel like they need to do. It's kind of like the difference between taking inspired action and required action. So a lot of the world kind of lives their life by taking required action, right? They truly are like they're like a human doing, right? Versus once you really get in tune with your intuition, then you can become a human being. And I know that sounds really corny, but it's true. Like that really is the difference. So, just going, paying attention to your gut all the time. And so I talked about this in another live stream, but the importance of so like what I find helpful is to give your emotions a number. Like between, you could even do, maybe -10 and +10. And I would say aim for those people, places, experiences that are like a 9 or a 10. And that might sound really high and maybe even really extreme, but I think it's helpful to identify a few of those. So like figuring out like, man, when are you in the zone? Like, do you have any people in your life that when you talk to them on the phone or you see them in person, like you just feel so in the zone around them? Or like for me, I love being out on the water. That is just, and camping. I love to camp. Like that is a 9 or a 10 for me. It just brings out absolute bliss for me. Campfires is a 9 or a 10 for me. So kind of knowing yourself well enough, like what are those 9 or 10s for you? And then paying attention to like, well, what does a 5 feel like for you? What does a 2 feel like for you? What does a 0 feel like for you? What does a -10 feel like to you? And so then that way, when you can start paying attention to what things are, you're going to be more in tune on a more regular basis. So paying attention, like, with how do your sheets feel to you? How does your bed feel? How does a certain meal taste? How does how are things for you physically? How are things for you emotionally? And just really getting more in tune. So yes, Trisha saying, go with your gut. Once you start trusting your gut, you're going to know you were right. Don't care what other people say. Trust yourself. Huda says, yes, Dana, I was always in pain, my body, my headache, etc. when he was home. I think a lot of people are, and I think my guess would be a lot of people that go to doctors for symptoms like depression, like anxiety, like chronic pain, probably a big underlying reason for fibromyalgia. These types of things has to do with the body's way of storing trauma. Again, because a lot of people don't identify what they're going through as abusive. People tend to have this idea, and everybody has their own idea, right? But people tend to have this idea that an abusive relationship is a man hitting a woman in the face and like leaving a black eye. And so if what they're experiencing is not that, then they don't identify it as it being abusive. They might think, well, this isn't great, right? But they don't realize how traumatic what they're going through really is, because it's kind of become the new normal. It might be the new normal to get yelled at, or to be invalidated, or to the gaslighting, or to be called names, or to be ignored. Being ignored is incredibly abusive. Or just kind of feeling like you have no voice. These things, they grind a person down. And our authentic self, like our true self, really, and this is going to sound really hippie woo woo, but our authentic self is here to express itself, right? So we're here to really tap into our purpose, which we find our purpose through paying attention to our passions, paying attention to what really makes us feel good, and then just doing more of that. But we can't be our authentic self if we've lost our power and control, if somebody else has taken our power and control, or if we've willingly given away our power and control to another person. Then we can't be ourselves. We've lost, and that's the thing, right? Because our authentic self wants to come through, it wants to shine, it wants to create, because we're all here with our own unique gifts and talents, you know? And there's only one you. Like, there is only one you. And, you know, you're here to give voice to that. And so if we try to stifle that, then, it's like our body's way, our authentic self's way of just trying to get through to us, to say, like, we're off track. Like, we have a purpose for being here and we need to live it. And I'm just going to keep making you more and more uncomfortable until you leave, is really what it is, or until you break down. It's like change tends to happen oftentimes when we hit enough pain. They say, kind of like with alcoholics or drug addicts, like they have to hit rock bottom before they change. And that's oftentimes true, because there's just not a big enough reason why. A person can have insight into that they have a problem, right? But if there's no motivation to change, then they're not going to change. Like, they have to have enough pain. They have to have enough reason why in order to actually go through the pain of changing. The pain of staying the same has to be worse than the pain of changing. So, okay, M. Fisher says, I realized I had made someone else feel less than this week, and it broke my heart. I apologized, and it was accepted, but I felt bad. So I'm glad that you bring that up. And, here's the thing is, this stuff isn't taught, right? Like, emotional health and kind of what is abuse is not taught. And so we're all kind of mucking through it the best we can. And I make mistakes too. I, have said really hurtful or really invalidating things, and not meant to, right? Like, I just kind of felt like, well, that was just really my opinion about that. And came across as really insensitive and really invalidating. But it's like one of those things, though. Once we know better, then we can do better. So if it's brought to your attention, then you can work towards doing better. Like, I can work towards doing better. None of us start at the finish line, right? Because this stuff, like I said, this is not taught. It's not taught, and it's really not discussed. So it's we're just kind of figuring it all, just figuring it out as we go. There's a fantastic book that we read in the book club, and I think I'd mentioned this a little bit last week, but I really feel like I'm going to be doing this, is just making a video kind of book review for each of these book club books. But one of the book club books was called The Verbally Abusive Relationship by Patricia Evans, and it's a fantastic book. She covers in there, I want to say, 15 different types of verbal abuse, which, it's pretty much the same as emotional abuse. And it's a fantastic book. And she covers a lot of different types of verbal abuse that I would never have even identified as verbal abuse. So it was very eye opening, very validating. It was sort of like, oh, yeah, okay, that's why that situation didn't feel good, because it wasn't good. Because again, like we all have these ideas as far as like what an abusive or problematic situation feels like. And it's, but once we see it, so like after reading that book, after going through those 15 different points, I saw some of myself in that. I'm like, wow, you know what? I have done this before. And, or wondering, you know what? I feel like I kind of do this with my mom. Like we have this kind of this tense dynamic sometimes. Or, you just kind of, you can't help, right? Like, but reflect back onto your own stuff and think, well, what, what kind of problematic behavior do I have? And what do I need to work on? Because a lot of the stuff, it's subconscious. It's how we're used to relating to people. And and like again, like once we know better, we can do better. So like for example, using the whole like I statements, right? So I think back to like my dynamic, especially with my mom when I was a teenager. I was such an angry kid, and an angry teenager. But I really didn't. We would have some really bad fights where I would yell and I would say I would really cut to the core. I would just say really mean things to her because I was angry. I was just angry, and you know, blaming her for a lot of stuff. And using a lot of you statements, like just putting all of my stuff, all of my hurt, all of my anger, and just blaming her. And now kind of realizing, okay, yeah, a lot of those feelings were valid, but the way I went about it was not, not appropriate. And so, and since I've started this whole site, my mom and I have had a ton of really great conversations, and just kind of opening up those conversations. So, we all grow and evolve and kind of are doing the best we can with where we are. So, let's see. Let me. Yes, yes. Teresa says, when I go into a rage, I'm very verbally abusive. I want to hurt the person like they hurt me, but I never mean what I say, but it hurts people and they don't forget. Right. And so I think that's so important to realize that that's probably a knee jerk reaction for a lot of people, right? And I still have it too. Where, so like overcoming understanding, we were talking about trolls and haters on the site. And I get people that say like a lot of, and not a lot of people, but when I do get comments that are really mean and cruel and they're designed to tear me down, my initial reaction is I want to lash out. I want to just verbally attack them. I want to put them in their place. I want to I want to cut them down. I want to lash out too. And but knowing like this isn't going to help anything. It's just going to add fuel to the fire. And we can't unsay things. And I think it can be helpful too to realize when people do say really hurtful, ugly things, especially kids, it's their way of saying, anger. They say that anger is the bodyguard of hurt, and I would agree completely. So it's sort of like them saying, "Look at how much I hurt." Because that's what they're saying when kids say all kinds of I hate you and you're not my mom and I wish you were dead and kind of whatever kids are saying when they're tearing somebody down or when your partner's tearing you down. It's basically like them saying, look at how much I hurt, and I'm just going to use you as my poison bucket or my verbal punching bag, and I'm just going to just get all of this pain and this toxicity and I'm just going to throw it onto you. And it can be, it's hard to just to distance yourself from that and to not feed into it. But there's no benefit in us getting dragged down, because then that negativity just perpetuates itself. Yeah, 25 cent worth says, Dana, anger keeps us from feeling the hurt. I was an angry kid too. Yeah, so, for me, when I was a kid, I didn't realize why I was angry until probably a few months ago because I didn't identify what I went through as abusive in any way, shape, or form. I just, like I said before, I grew up feeling very unloved and very ignored, and I was really angry about that. And I didn't realize it. I didn't know. Like, I didn't know why I didn't like going home to visit. I didn't know why I had this big chip on my shoulder when it came to my parents. I didn't know why I just had all of this anger inside of me. And I had spent tons of time in therapy, years, trying to figure it out. And as soon as I would go home to visit, it was like I was just a I felt like I didn't have skin, like I didn't have emotional skin. And any little thing that they would say, I would just get triggered. And it's like I would just lash out. It was awful. And, now kind of realizing, oh, like this is why I felt like that, you know? And yeah, there's a lot of anger there and there's a lot of resentment and it's stuff that I've got to work through. But, so Kevin says, that's why you can't just forgive until you understand because it's protecting you from further hurt. I love that. I love that. Yes. And it's that understanding and that validation. Because I didn't know. And I would go to therapists and they're like, well, is it because your parents divorced when you were 13? And is it this or is it that? And I'm like, no, like, I don't know. I don't know why I feel the way that I feel. Like, I'm just angry. And it was, it wasn't until I started doing this channel and hearing again, like, seeing my story and my issues reflected back on other people. And you kind of pick up little nuggets of wisdom along the way, right? So like one person might make a comment and in sort of like, bingo, wow, yes, that's that. That makes sense. So, okay, Center Within says, Dana, what cracked the code for you? How did you discover the truth as to why you felt angry? I think the first little clue was when somebody had mentioned in the support group kind of like the like the rough draft version of the empty buckets. And they had said that they had walked around with the empty bucket of feeling unimportant. And that was just this huge aha moment for me. And then I realized, oh, yeah, yeah, okay. My empty buckets were, oh, and no. And they had said, what empty buckets, do you have, either real or perceived? And it was the word perceived. That was my aha moment because I thought, I grew up feeling unloved and unimportant, but I had spent a lot of time kind of comparing my childhood with other people. And I'm like, well, really, like a lot of people have it a lot worse. So I didn't feel it didn't feel valid for how I felt. And I felt guilty. I'm like, you know what? We had 3 meals a day. We went to the library. My mom read us bedtime stories. There was a lot of things that were good and right about my childhood. So I, I kind of felt like, well, trauma or abuse is only valid if it's extreme. I didn't realize, my parents were never home. They worked a lot. And so as a child, I perceived their their absence as I internalized that. And I kind of thought, well, I'm not important. I'm not lovable. And so a lot of it was just my perception of events and just kind of the dynamic. So, yeah, realizing, just viewing things in a different way and realizing, children just internalize things differently. So it was worth kind of slowing down and examining, why do I feel this way? Even if it doesn't feel valid, like, why do I feel this way? And and of course there were other dynamics at play in my house, but, and in my childhood, but that was probably the biggest one, in starting piecing the pieces together from there. So, yeah. Lauren says, I completely understand that. Comparing your childhood to another person's childhood, not wanting to say you were angry or hurt for fear of sounding selfish. Yep. So Jenna says, Dana, how do I turn off my survival mode? Well, I guess, can you talk a little bit more about what what you're experiencing? Like, is it kind of PTSD stuff, or is it something specific? And then while you're typing your response, I'm going to go up and get some other questions here, and we'll come back to yours. People are talking about hoovering. So I missed that question. Ambiguous Nomads mentioning the book, The Verbally Abusive Relationship, saying this book is really changing the game for me. Huge eye opener. It's validating my reality and helping me see things for what it is. Yes, that book, like, just, yeah, major eye opening stuff for me. I kind of feel like every parent, even if they haven't had an abusive childhood in any way, shape, or form, that book is worth reading, because you can read it and then kind of reverse engineer it. So it's like 15 ways that people normally abuse, and then, like, to do the opposite, right? To have a healthy relationship, you would do the opposite of those 15 things. So I will be doing a video about that book, because I have about 12 pages of notes on it. And if you go, again, my website, narcissistsupport.com/book club, you can get to the book club and you can read all of my notes. I post them every month by the 10th of the month for each book. And I normally take about a minimum 10 pages of notes from each book. So, Ayana says, CPTSD, oh, she read that it's a lifetime of healing. I think the first phase, or at least the one I'm in, seems to be crying a lot. So, yeah, I think, I don't know if I'd say it's a lifetime worth of healing. I think it's what you make of it. And I think that, PTSD can absolutely lead into post-traumatic growth. And, you know, it's in the mindset, So, like, for a big thing for me was making the decision that this was not going to destroy my life. Like, that was the first big decision I made. Like, just knowing that this is not, I'm not going to give them, or this, what happened, the power to ruin my life. And then the second decision was, I am going to make this one of the best things that's ever happened to me, even though I didn't know how. I didn't even, I mean, like, I was in such a low place when I had that realization. I mean, it's like ridiculous to even think that I would have even had that thought, because I was so low, but I just needed some sort of direction to steer into. So then it was, I'm going to use this for my highest and greatest good. And then kind of like this power, this resolve inside of me was like, not only, damn it, am I going to make this one of the best things that's ever happened to me, I'm going to put this towards the highest and best good for other people. And then that really just gave me, I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about it. Like, that gave me a bigger vision. It gave me a vision, is what it was. It didn't give me hope. It gave me a freaking vision to, like, steer into, to realize, there's so much good that can come from this, and that needs to come from this. And so that just, I mean, that was huge. That was huge. It took me several years, after I went through everything, to get to the place, healing wise, where was able to start my blog and was able to start this YouTube channel. I had started writing about this a handful of times and would get a little bit into it and then would very quickly realize I am not ready. Like, I thought I was ready, I'm not ready. And then kind of, I don't even know, like, I don't even know what started it, but it was sort of like one day it was just like I was ready. And I just started writing and writing and writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And, it's my blog and this YouTube channel will be out for a year next month. So it's only been about a year, and I've put out 162 videos and 180 blog posts in 12 months, and actually in 11 months. So it was just like the dam burst and I was ready. And then I just went bananas. Like just talking and talking and talking and talking and getting all of this out, and it's just, you know. So I think the point of that is using your pain for a purpose, giving your pain a purpose, using this to really motivate you to change your life in some sort of massive way. Maybe it's talking about what happened to you, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's using this as like rocket fuel for you to find a hobby, or to get into really great shape, or to, kind of whatever. But again, it goes back to like really knowing yourself and knowing what juices you. And there's this kind of other realization that I had, that we all have three lives. We have the life that we wish we had. We have the life that we're currently living, and then we have the life that's trying to live through us. And it's that last one, that life that's trying to live through us. That's our passion. Like, that's our purpose. That's that kind of like nagging feeling that we're either on track or that we're like off track and that things need to change. It's the kind of like that low grade discomfort that tends to grow. And so the more we know ourselves, the more we tap into our passion and what makes us feel good, the more we can really get on track, and the more that other life that's trying to live through us can surface. I get how like nutso that sounds. So, but it's true. It's really, really true. It's that inner guidance, that inner wisdom that we all have. I don't know where it comes from, but I know for an absolute certainty that it's there. And I think people experience it, but we tend to gloss over it. So, okay, Jenna says, yes, I got rid of a big narcissist that was in my life for 14 years and was very good at making me feel like I was responsible for everything bad between us. They always walk on eggshells, but I felt that way about, they always walk on eggshells, but I felt that way about them. Now I tend to get defensive and misinterpret people who I realize later never meant to attack me. It's difficult being told I'm at fault for something now. I think most people, if tend to not handle criticism well in general, right? Even if they haven't been abused. So it's kind of in a person's approach, right? And maybe to kind of just tell yourself, okay, like this all goes back to like awareness and acceptance, right? So like, this is where you are right now, and you're at a place where this is a trigger for you, right? So being criticized is a trigger. It is what it is. It's okay, because this is where you are, right? And to just be able to slow it down and say, okay, you know what? I tend to not react really well when somebody criticizes me. And so now that you know that about yourself, you can kind of anticipate. So if somebody's going to criticize you at work or kind of wherever this is happening, to realize I need to probably not say anything, because I might be overly reactive, or say something I'm going to regret, right? So to say to them, to have some sort of response already thought about, right? So it's to say something like, you know what, that's a really interesting point. Can I get back to you on that? Right? Or, let me think about this for a little bit. something that can buy you some time. And so you, and to ideally give them a time frame, right? So to say something like, that's a really interesting thought on that, or I'm going to have to think about that a little bit more. Can I get back to you tomorrow? Or can I get back to you in a few hours? And then to kind of just watch those different emotions as they're surfacing. You know, is it anger? Is it frustration? Is it, are you kind of going back to this old relationship? Is there validity in what they're saying? Maybe there's not, right? And so to kind of be able to give yourself time to sort through that. And then if it's friends and family that are criticizing you, you can tell them too, like, this is, like, I'm open to, discussing different issues, or I am, kind of what have you. But, I do best if you were to kind of give me a specific example, or kind of, whatever you need. People that are in your corner, like friends and family that support you, right? They're, if they know what you've gone through, they're probably going to be understanding as to how to approach you. So, like, most people tend to be that way. So, like, for example, I am very, very jumpy. I've been that way for a long time. I went through a period when I was in high school. The first really problematic person I dated, he stalked me for several years after that. And I have been jumpy ever since. And so friends and family know. And like, and we all kind of joke about it now, but it's to a point of ridiculousness. Like, if you're going to walk into a room, people tend to make a lot of noise. Because I am jumpy, and I scare my coworkers all the time. We scare each other all the time if we come around the corner at the same time, because my response is, I'm just like, I'm very reactive, and it's embarrassing, but that's I'm that way, and I've been that way for a long time, and I don't mean to be that way. Now I can kind of laugh about it, but it's that knee jerk reaction. But people that are on, in my corner, they know, like, don't do that. Like, be noisy if you're going to come into a room, or realize that if I, scream or yell or whatever, that's where that comes from. And it's not them, it's me. Right. So, and then again too, like, anticipating, right? So, like, setting yourself up to win. So, for example, when I was married, when we got divorced about 6-7 years ago, for a long time, we had, those sleigh bells that people have at Christmas time? We had those on the door. So whenever anybody opened the door, like, the bells would jingle. It just, like, I get, and, it's ridiculous, but that's my brain is that way. So, it's part of me, so what are you going to do? So, okay, so Between asks, are they born this way, or are they created? That is a great question, and nobody really knows for sure. I think the main thought is that most narcissists and sociopaths are kind of created out of trauma, right? So we all tend to be victims of victims. And I think most of them are. They probably come from very abusive childhoods, or very neglectful childhoods, or war-torn countries, or they've experienced extreme trauma of some kind. But again, like, it's people's perception of trauma, because the two men that I was tangled up with didn't go through extreme trauma, but they were total sociopaths. So, like, you know, the brain is an interesting thing, and we don't fully understand it. So, yes, there is definitely a nurture component to it, but there's also a nature component where, there's something going on there. They don't attach to people. They have, brain scans have shown really low empathy, high reactivity, high levels of impulsiveness. So it's, there's both going on. Margaret says, Dana, I'm really afraid to start dating again for fear that I'll draw another narcissist. What are the first red flags to look for? Well, I think probably the first red flags are looking within. Okay. So it's really, really important that you are at a point where you feel emotionally solid enough to date. I think a lot of people, and I've been there too, we make the mistake of thinking, boy, I'm really lonely. I'd really like another person in my life. And then we start dating. But dating is a very volatile experience, right? And I mean, it definitely can be. And if we're not emotionally stable, it's really easy to really get re-victimized. So, and so there's also this concept I have with the empty buckets, right? And so making sure that your bucket of significance, so making sure that you're feeling, you know, that you're feeling loved, that you're feeling significant, that you're feeling important, that, you know, your bucket in that area is full enough to where you don't have a vulnerability there. So because it's really hard if we're feeling unloved, if we're feeling ignored, if we're feeling unimportant, these, you know, if we're starved out for affection or attention, it's really hard, if not impossible, for us to make healthy decisions because we're so starved out. It's sort of like being really starved out and going to the grocery store, right? Like, you're not going to go for nourishing healthy foods. You're going to go for really high calorie, high fat food. That's the way the brain is wired. It goes into survival mode. So if we're starved out for affection or attention or importance, our brain is going to gravitate towards people that give us all of those things right away. And so that's how we tend to date, chronically date, narcissists and sociopaths and other types of problematic people because they do move so fast. So it's kind of like a junk food relationship, is what it is. It's that instant gratification for them and for us, right? Where they just lay on the charm, they lay on the attention. It's this emotional whirlwind, and it feels so good because it's so much attention and so much. We feel important, we feel loved, and we feel appreciated, and all of this right away. And it very quickly, you know, we get caught up in it, and it's hard to walk away from that if we're feeling starved out. So the biggest thing is, you know, again, to look within, to move slowly, to move really slowly. So when you meet a new person, you know, you're not spending hours on the phone every night talking to them. And I know I still can get sucked into making these mistakes. And it doesn't mean that they're narcissists necessarily. It just means it's not a good idea to be spending that much time talking and bonding with a person that you really don't know that well right off the bat. Like, because problematic behavior takes time to surface, and it's really easy for our brain to kind of fill in the gaps of what we hope this person is, and to kind of create this fantasy. And that fantasy is what's so hard to walk away from, and it's why we tend to stay. Especially, you know, we start glossing over red flags because there's so much that we think is quote unquote right about them, but we're seeing them through rose colored glasses, right? So moving slowly is a big one. Paying attention to your gut instinct is just absolutely huge, because if you see red flags, you're going to see them within the first couple days. You really, really will. But it's about, and I said this before, and I'll say it, I'll keep saying it. With the red flags are not seen, they're felt. So you feel a red flag. You feel like something's off. Remember, I was saying the first sign of a problematic situation is confusion. So if you're feeling that feeling of, that's weird, or is it me or is it him or her, right? Like who's at fault here? Like, what's going on? If you're finding yourself being introspective and asking, is it me, is it him or her, or that level of confusion, those are your first red flags that you're going to feel. And so those are good to slow down and examine further. Because if you think about how you are with people that you do feel good around, you don't feel that way. And you probably never felt that way. So, and a lot of it, just healthy boundaries, healthy standards, these kinds of things. So, great question. Okay. 2002 asks Dana, well, regular people can have abusive behavior, right? I mean, what differs them from a narcissist? I love that. So, great question. So, yes, quote unquote, normal people, regular people can have abusive behavior. What differentiates them from a narcissist is that really it's the ability, the sincere desire for accountability, and the sincere desire to change. So, like, a regular person, so I had mentioned, right? So, like, when I was a teenager, and even still, I mean, there's still things like ways that I act that I am not okay with, that I'm not proud of, that are very reactive. And I often think, like, I really wish I would have handled that differently, right? It's in being fully accountable for that behavior and owning it and saying, if somebody were to call me out and say, hey, that is, or if I were to call somebody else out, like, hey, that is not okay, and this really hurt my feelings, or I just don't see things the same way. And again, like healthy people, normal people have that desire for that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication, whereas kind of more unconscious people, like highly problematic people, don't. So if a person, and again, a person doesn't have to be a narcissist in order to really kind of wreak havoc in your life, right? So if a person is doing the opposite of that, if they have closed communication, so like silent treatment, or they're shutting you down, or they're invalidating you, or they're minimizing your concerns, or they're denying your concerns, right? They're doing the gaslighting, they're doing the projecting, all of these things. If they have closed communication, if they have dishonest communication, if they're lying, if they're spinning things, if they're telling half truths, if they're only admitting to the very bare minimum to where you're having to like pull it out of them, that's problematic. If they're having insincere communication, again, the gaslighting, the manipulation, if they're having communication that's not solutions oriented, where they're wanting to just blame you for everything and they're not willing to own their behavior, if you're feeling like you can't bring up certain things with your partner, then that's problematic. And so there is no relationship with all of that problematic behavior. So I mean, you can bring it up, but if you continue going around that same mountain over and over again, and it's the same kind of behavior, and even if they do acknowledge it, right? Because a lot of like the more of like the covert narcissists, or problematic people that aren't ready to change, even if they're not a narcissist, if you bring up problematic behavior and they smile and they nod, but then they keep doing it, then they're showing you they're not ready to change. So then the ball is in your court, and you have to kind of figure out, okay, well, given the situation, right? Like, I voiced my concerns, their behavior is still not changing. Now it's back on us, right? Okay, so now how are we going to handle this? At what point, where is our deal breaker behavior in this? And so here's the thing. So I think a lot of us tend to go into dating situations with this idea of everything can be fixed, and we don't have a good idea as far as what deal breaker behavior is. So that's problematic, right? So if we're going to tolerate being lied to and manipulated and cheated on and stolen from, and and of course, it's a gradual descent, right? I mean, like, nobody volunteers for that. Like, nobody walks into that. It's a slow grinding down, but it's because abusive relationships are that slow grinding down. It really helps for us to get crystal clear in the beginning, when it's easier to walk away with what behavior we're okay with. And then, so if you are in a relationship with a person, right, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm not sure if I should stay or go, to get really clear. Like, okay, are they willing to work on things? And if they're saying that they are, then to get an idea. How long are you willing to stay? And what kind of changes do you need to see have happen? And if you're going to go into therapy or work on things like how much time are you willing to spend? How much money are you willing to spend? Are they willing? A lot of it's like their level of sincerity, right? Like if they have a pattern of cheating or stealing or, kind of what have you, are they willing to live a life of total transparency? You know, a lot of them aren't. They deny it, they spin it, you know, so it's, kind of wherever our line is for what's acceptable behavior is what we tend to stay with. So it's really important that when we're dating, especially, to make sure that we're bringing our highest and best self and our highest and best standards and boundaries to the game. So let's see. Let's see. I think that people are talking about the fight or flight thing still, talking about getting rid of caffeine and coffee. Yeah, any type of like stimulant. If you're already, because your adrenaline is pumping through you, right? So that's the fight or flight mechanism. Like you've got that norepinephrine and epinephrine and adrenaline and all of these like these chemicals that are you're priming our body to run, to slow that down. It really helps to get rid of caffeine and to amazing the difference with switching to decaf, especially if you're feeling anxious already, is huge. And again, like it's a series of little things, but switching to caffeine is huge. Paying attention to, what are you watching? Like, what are you feeding your brain? Like, if you're already feeling anxious, like watching all of, uh, the news doesn't help. Watching a lot of things that really get your blood boiling doesn't help. I always, tease my father when I go to visit is, he's got the news on 24/7. And then in the car, it's talk radio. And I'm like, Dad, well, no wonder. Like, no wonder your blood pressure is so high. My blood pressure would be so high, too, if I was around all of this bombarding my brain with everything wrong in the world. I mean, it stresses me out going there. So just paying attention to, like, what are you feeding your brain? And, I'm not saying that you have to, like, tune out kind of what's going on in the world, but realizing that the effect that it's having on you. So maybe you watch the news for 20 minutes and then you turn it off and then you go watch something else. So giving your brain time to just settle down, watching comedies, again, this goes back to like knowing what makes you feel good, right? So if you're in that fight or flight mode, doing things that make you feel calm and relaxed and safe and secure. So a lot of affirmations, a lot of meditation, a lot of comedies are good. A lot of music that switches your mood. So I think music is a great way to do it. It's kind of a great way to like tiptoe around your brain to where your brain can relax, and without kind of, there's a lot of resistance. Our brain's going to kick up a lot of resistance because it wants to hang on to that feeling of fight or flight because it's still feeling in danger. So we're trying to bypass survival instinct here, which is really powerful. But different things change our state instantly. Music is one of them. So, listening to some music that you really enjoy that has a good connotation for you, is really powerful. So let's see. Let's get some more questions here. Kevin says, yeah, walking helps the brain detoxify itself from bad stored up chemicals. Walking, massage. There's, I was reading a really interesting article the other day on how our body stores emotions. And I had never thought about it this way before, but it was so interesting. So it was saying like when we first experience something, we have an emotional response to it. And it's generally one of four emotions. It's joy. joy. Oh shoot, like joy. I forget anger, fear, and then there was another one. It might have been euphoria. I don't know if that was right. Joy, anger, fear are the three that I remember the most, and that those all trigger like a chemical response, right? So like I was saying, you've got this chemical release when we experience fear or when we experience anger, and those emotions, because those chemicals are stored in our body, and it's stored as tension generally in different parts. So it's headaches, it's depression, it's muscle aches, it's tightness, it's stiffness, it's all of these things. And I thought that was really really interesting. Oh, I like that. M. Fisher says, or try that thing that Tolle suggests. Just stand up and shake all over. That's what ducks do after a fight with another duck. I like that. Just getting rid of that stress. Mindfulness, you can do, you know, walking meditations where you're paying attention to every single step. Like, how does the step feel in your foot? Like, can your foot feel the ground? Can you feel the shock of this when you take a step? Can you feel the pressure of the ground pushing against your foot and against your knee? And can you feel how your body weight shift? And can you just really getting in tune with that very moment is it's very very powerful. So that's going to be the book that we're going to be reading in the book club for. I'm a book ahead. I just finished the book for April, which is on controlling people, which was written by Patricia Evans, which is the author of The Verbally Abusive Relationship. The book for May is going to be Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. And that book is absolutely phenomenal. I'm so glad I read that book when I was going through my divorce. A friend had recommended it to me. That book probably saved my life. It was just phenomenal. And I will for sure be doing a video about that book because it's just so great. It's all about being in the now, and that is a really just a very calming thing to do. To just gratitude. I'm a big fan of gratitude. I take time in the morning and at night and kind of periodically throughout the day to just start noticing my environment and being like outrageously thankful for different things. So in it, little thing, it doesn't have to be big things, little things, the, like earlier it was raining and it was so relaxing, just being thankful. Like that is just so nice. Like I'm just really enjoying the rain, right? Or being thankful that you can hear the rain, or being thankful that I have a roof over my head to where I can enjoy the rain, but I don't have to be out in it. Just everything, just being thankful for it, I think really helps to slow the brain down and kind of helps to refocus it on just knowing that there's so much good in the world and that you are safe and that in this moment, like, you are safe. It's really slows down that the ruminating thoughts and a lot of the negativity. I heard a podcast the other day that I loved, and the guy had said in there that he makes it a point to, before he gets out of bed in the morning, he spends so much time being grateful. He feels the gratitude so deeply that it brings a tear to his eye. And I love that. Love that, love that, love that. So if you can just get so overwhelmed, and again, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can just be the amazingness of rain. Like that is just amazing. I mean, it's water and it's nourishing and the sound is beautiful and everything that it does for us, and just getting so lost in the appreciation for a simple thing to where it just brings a tear to your eye. That does a ton for just kind of calming yourself and just kind of raising, our vibration and what we're focusing on. Yes, exactly. Dawn says if you get the inside right, the outside will fall into place. I agree completely. And there are no shortcuts. That's the thing. There are no shortcuts. And that's, I think, too, kind of one of the gifts of, and I know it sounds terrible to say, but it's true. It's one of the gifts of abusive relationships is it forces us to work on our inside. It forces us to develop a really good relationship with ourselves. And it does it in a really painful way where everything is kind of torn down to where all we are left with is ourselves, right? Like all we are left with is our relationship with ourselves. And it's a really intense time for us to get real with ourselves and to examine what's going on and to make peace with a lot of things we need to make peace with. So that's another book. That's another book that we read in book club that I highly, 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 highly recommend, which I will do a video on because Doug made a video about it and I wanted to address some of those points because it was you, Doug, you brought up a lot of really great points in your video. So when I do a video about that book, I'll rewatch your video and then we'll address them and we'll start that conversation there. But the book is You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, and fantastic book. She also has a YouTube channel, and she's been at this forever, a really long time. Just a really, really neat woman. She's got a ton of affirmation videos and, you know, really kind of teaching us to turn within and to love ourselves and to make peace with different things in our past and just kind of healing our life is what it is. So, yes. Okay, Nick, great point. Nick says the world exists entirely in the brain. So recognizing the good of the world trains your brain. And that's so true, right? Because reality is very subjective. It's all about how we perceive what happens to us. And the cool thing is we can change our perception at any time. So a person can be really hateful and ugly and hurtful. We can either choose to internalize that and to take them for face value and to think, oh boy, maybe I really am all of these terrible things that they're saying. Or we can realize, boy, this person is really hurting, because that's not normal, healthy things to say to another human being. So that's really unfortunate that they're hurting that much. And I wish them light and love, but I'm going to distance myself now. And then we don't internalize it, right? Like we let them carry their own stuff, right? We let their words define them. We don't let their words define us. So, Sam says, hey Dana, love your videos. Why would my ex-boyfriend get his new target pregnant so quickly after discarding me? Also, when he was with me, he used to future fake about us too. Well, my guess is he probably got her pregnant on accident, and they tend to do that because they're impulsive and they're very much kind of live in the moment kind of people, and they don't think ahead. And it's hard to kind of guess as to what somebody else is thinking, but it's unfortunate for her, and it's going to be unfortunate for that child that that this person is so impulsive and causes a lot of damage and destruction and isn't thinking. So yeah, the future faking, they all tend to do that. It's just kind of promising. Well, I shouldn't say all of them. A lot of them tend to do it. There's a lot of narcissists that don't even care. They don't even try. Like it's truly all about them. And so they don't care. But it's incredibly painful. It's incredibly painful. All their behavior, they move on at light speed. In part, it's to kind of prove that they're not the problem. And in part, it's the fact that that other person has probably already, they don't wait. They don't they don't have morals and values, right? Like they're in reaction mode. And so that other person, people were like, well, they moved on so quickly. Well, the other person's probably been in their life for a while. Like, we're the last ones to know. So by the time the relationship ends with us, it's already been over for a while. Like, we just got the memo last, right? Amanda says, I wish I could move past the pain and asking how and why for everything that is happening. It just hurts so bad. I know. And I'm so sorry. Gosh, I think we all know. And it's understandable, right? It's understandable that you're going to ask how and why because it doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense that you could care so much, and especially if they were giving the illusion of caring so much, and the next thing you know, everything comes crashing down. That's incredibly, incredibly painful, and that pain does take a little while to move past, and to just keep moving in the direction that you feel that you need to move in, and surrounding yourself with people that you feel that you can talk to about and that you can ask questions, and that can try to kind of shine some clarity on you. Yes, Trisha says, Amanda, we've all been there, and we're getting through this. We're thriving now. So, it's it's part of the healing process, and being kind to yourself during all of this, right? Because we can't fix normal, right? And so the pain is part of it. Like the pain is what happens when growth is necessary and when growth is happening. And so there's a lot of personal growth that's going on right now, and that's part of a lot of this pain. And to realize that you're not alone in this and that you don't have to be alone in this. Like I said, there's lots of support groups out there. Mine is my website, narcissistsupport.com, but there's lots of them, like, lots of them out there, lots of them on Facebook. And to just kind of hunker down. Like, I think that's probably a good way to go about it, is realizing that it's going through a really bad breakup. It's kind of like having the emotional flu, right? So taking care of yourself like you would if you had the physical flu, right? So if you have the physical flu, you're going to get all bundled up in bed, and you're going to watch some movies, and you're going to let yourself sleep a lot, and you're going to eat chicken soup or vegetable soup, or you're going to, you're just going to take it easy, and you're going to be good to yourself. You're not going to push yourself. It's going through a bad breakup with, especially an abusive relationship, right? Where it's like you've gone through hell, being extra good to yourself and taking a time out and realizing what do you need in order to start feeling better? Is it talking to a friend? Is it joining a support group? Is it spending a day where you eat soup and crackers and you watch movies? Or is it lots of days where you eat soup and crackers and watch movies? Is it, is it taking bubble baths? Is it getting a pedicure? Is it journaling? Is it kind of how can you be good to yourself right now, right? And then just kind of steering into that direction and realizing that this pain is not going to last forever. It does pass. I know it doesn't feel like it, right? I know that it feels like you're probably always going to feel this way, and that this is awful and terrible, and that there's no way out of it. But that's an illusion. That's not true. Like, the pain does pass. So just hang in there and just keep reminding yourself that, you're in a lot of pain. There's a lot of reason for you to be in a lot of pain, but that you won't always feel this way. So, let's see. Oh, somebody, I just saved the chat and then I lost the chat. Oh, shoot. Lynn, had asked, why did I ignore the red flags even though they were so noticeable? Okay, great question. And I think there's two main reasons for this. So the first one has to do with this concept called empty buckets, right? And it's basically that we're all born into this life with three buckets: the bucket of safety, the bucket of stability, and the bucket of security. And so the bucket of safety has to do, this is kind of like the bottom tier of Maslow's pyramid hierarchy of needs, if you're familiar with that. So the safety needs are basically our physical needs. So like food, clothing, shelter, water, air, these kinds of things. The bucket of stability is our emotional needs. So feeling attention, love, significance, importance, affection, these kinds of things. The bucket of stability is kind of just the added reassurance that these other two buckets are going to continue to get filled in a predictable way. So our bucket of, when any of the buckets are running low, our brain has these different defense mechanisms that kick up. So, we have our physical defense mechanisms, right? So like fight, flight, feed, breed, freeze. These different feelings kick up, and it's designed to keep us safe. We also have emotional kind of defense mechanisms. And so the main kind of concept of this is called cognitive dissonance. And so it's basically mental distress that we tend to feel. And it's so basically, if we have a low bucket, right? So I use the example of my life. So I went around for a long time feeling like with low buckets in the areas of feeling important. I felt unimportant and unloved for a long time, right? So hold on, people are shouting at me to see somebody. Oh, I don't see the question that they are wanting. Okay, they said something like, Dana, look for Rosie. Rosie, I guess, can you repeat your question? And I'm going to keep answering the one why we glossed over the red flags. So if our bucket's low, right, then we're going to do what we need to do to get it filled. And so narcissists and other problematic people tend to do a really great job at, right away filling those buckets, right? So for me, I was primed. I was very vulnerable and I just drank up the love bombing from a narcissist. So all of the attention, I felt very important. I felt very loved, and I just drank it up. And so that's what hooked me. Well, once we're hooked, right, because we're starved out, and if we don't know how to fill those buckets ourselves, then we cling to whoever is filling the bucket for us, right? And so even if that person's really problematic. So because it feels so good to finally get that bucket filled, we hold on to it, even though there's red flags that are surfacing. And so when we get into this fog of cognitive dissonance, then when we get into this fog of cognitive dissonance, then that's when we justify and minimize and deflect and deny bad behavior. And this cognitive dissonance too is something that's really hard for a lot of people to get out of. And so it generally takes hitting rock bottom for a person to get out of that cognitive dissonance, because then they can no longer deny it anymore. But the problem is, if there's been enough time that's passed and there's been enough damage done, when that fog of cognitive dissonance clears, there can be this overwhelming level of shame and embarrassment that it can drive a lot of people to suicide. So, for example, people that get caught up with online dating scammers, right? They might, and this is why it doesn't matter how intelligent or how educated a person is, because intelligence has nothing to do with emotions as far as getting that emotional bucket filled. So a lot of people that join cults are, highly educated and very intelligent people, but they have the low buckets and generally feeling important or accepted. And so when this cult or when this online scammer or when this narcissist comes in and tells them everything that they want to hear, and they give them all this attention, the person just drinks it up. And that's how they're able to be manipulated. So, a lot of online dating scams, so they target people that are vulnerable. They target people that tend to be older. And then they lure them in thinking that they have this relationship and that they love them, and they come on very, very fast, right? And so then within a couple weeks, now this person feels like that they're actually engaged to this person, and of course the scammer's leading them on, and then they're kind of, milking them for money, right? Well, it takes a lot, and it's the same dynamic as an abusive relationship, right? So they've already given them, let's say, $5,000. Well, they are seeing red flags, right? Things are not adding up. And they realize this, but they want so badly to believe that this really could be a relationship because they're so lonely, because they're so starved out. And so they push aside their the truth, right? And they're gaslighting themselves, really, is what we're doing when we're suffering cognitive dissonance. Like we're lying to ourselves at a really deep core level, but we don't know we don't realize it at the time. Okay. And so the scammer is getting more and more money out of them. And so the more money they give, the deeper they get, right? And so it's one thing to admit that you've been scammed for, $500. It's another thing when it's your whole life savings. And so at that point, it's the deeper they get into those kinds of relationships, the harder it is for them to get out, and it's the same thing with abusive relationships, right? So like if you've been with a person who's hit you once, there might be some hesitation with getting out. If they've hit you 3 times, it's harder to get out. If they've hit you 300 times, then we have to reconcile with the fact of, okay, they've now hit me or yelled at me or put me down or cheated on me all of these times. If I leave now, then I have to kind of reconcile with this behavior's always been there. It's always been problematic. If I leave now, I probably should have also left many years ago. And so that is a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, understandably so, right? So it's so anyways, I guess kind of long story short, we gloss over red flags when we have a vulnerability. And a vulnerability is whatever bucket is running low. So just like if you've got a physical bucket that's running low, right? Like let's say if a person's homeless, then their top priority, and it's weird because it's the brain like downshifts to where we get those basic needs met. So this I think it's really important to understand how our brain works, because once we can see like, oh, this isn't us. Like this is how the brain is working to keep our physical self safe and to keep our emotional self safe. We don't have the luxury of like self-esteem and goals and future-oriented thinking if we're trying to get these more basic needs met. So if we're homeless, right, or if we haven't eaten in 2 days, our brain has downshifted into we need to get these needs met. Like we can't think about anything else. We can't discuss, the latest book in the book club if you haven't eaten in 2 days, right? Like you need to eat in order for you to think clearly. Like you need to get shelter in order for you to think clearly, because our brain is going into fight or flight mode, right? So, knowing okay, well, what buckets are am I running low on, and doing like an honest inventory, then we can work towards getting those filled. And then once we can get those filled, then they're not a vulnerability anymore. And maybe they're buckets that have been kind of running low for a long time, like from childhood. Then we can kind of realize, you know what, hey, like these tend to be my 2 areas of weakness. And it's something that I just kind of need to keep in the back of my mind, that and to make sure that I'm getting them filled on a regular basis, and that I'm not waiting until they're really low, that I'm like really lonely to start going out and spending time with people. So, but great question, because I think, I wondered, I think we've all wondered that a lot, and that made me nuts for the longest time. I couldn't figure out how did I misread the situation so poorly? Like how did that happen? And and how did it happen multiple times? Like I really couldn't. It took me a while to really kind of figure out what on earth was going on. Okay, Rosie says, "Thank you, Dana. I have the subtitles on the red flags in Spanish. Oh my gosh, I want to know how to send them to you." That is a great question. Let me think. How could you best send them to me? How about message me through YouTube, through my message box at YouTube. I think you can still send me a direct message there. And I will keep my eyes open for it, and just mention, Rosie from the live stream, and we'll go from there. But that's fantastic. We'll have to talk a lot more about that, and yeah. But that's great. I would really love to get all of these different red flags out in multiple languages. My website is multiple languages, so people can choose which language they want to read it in. But so I don't know. Did you? I'm just going to make the assumption that you did that yourself. That you put them out and you translated them. So let's see. Let's see. Adrian saying good night. Okay, good night. Good night. Annette, good night. Adrian. Rosie says okay. She's gonna message me. Um, Thank you so much for translating them. That's absolutely amazing. I'm blown away that you did that. That's a ton of work. Like, I am beyond impressed and excited about that, and it just like wow. I mean, wow. So very, very cool. Thank you. Thank you. Michelle says, "Hi Dana, either you're a small person or your cup is huge." Alice in Wonderland. This cup is huge. It is huge. Like, and maybe I am kind of a small person. It's a little bit of both. So, yeah. It's tea, my tea. It's good stuff. Mona Lisa asks, "Can a person have Asperger's and narcissism?" Yes, they sure can. So a person can have, they can have all kinds of things. They can have, they could have Asperger's. They could have They could be a narcissist. Um, they could have diabetes. They could have cancer. They could have all kinds of like co-occurring conditions at the same time. So I think a lot of people, they do tend to get caught up in that. They kind of think it's an either or thing. Like, well, does this person have a personality disorder or are they mentally ill? But the reality is, and not that, a person with Asperger's is not mentally ill, but a person can have both a personality disorder and and a mental illness. So a person can be bipolar and they can be a sociopath. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's true. So, and they can be an alcoholic, and they can also have cancer, and they can, and. So, yeah, it's, there is, I don't know if Buddha said this or who said this, but I love it. It said, be kind because some people suffer too much, and be kind because some people don't suffer enough. And I love that. It's just, there's some people that really go through it in this world, in this lifetime, and then there's some people that just don't suffer enough. But those that don't suffer enough really, they don't ever have those experiences that where they really get to know themselves to the level of those who do suffer. So, um, let's see. Karen says, "Dana, I have looked for and not found why my sociopath ex keeps using sexually degrading names and accusations when I'm completely not anything he says." He is. they tend to do that. They tend to focus on areas that we're sensitive about, or that they feel like that they can inflict kind of, maximum emotional harm, and that's what they target. So, you know, you can just, if he's your ex, I wouldn't listen to him. If he's telling you stuff like that, I would just say, I don't want to be talked to that way. Like, I don't need to be talked to this way, or, this conversation's over, or I'll talk to you later. And that's assuming that you have to keep contact. If you don't have to keep contact, yeah, I just consider blocking the number. So, and distancing yourself, but however you choose to handle that, just realizing, he's if he's name calling and stuff, that this is on him. Like, this is a reflection of his maturity, or immaturity, I should say, and this has nothing to do with you. Like, they say they're very childlike in that way. They do what they can to provoke and disrupt other people, because they like that emotional reaction. So, it's they're petty and they're immature, and they get their bucket filled, that emotional bucket of significance filled by being, you know, by engaging in conflict, by being high conflict people, is what it is. So they like to get a rise. Yep. Yes, they do. And yeah, do what you need to do. Lavender Curl says, change your number then. I would agree. Like, do what you need to do to get this person out of your life. It's just not worth it. Mona Lisa asks, I'm hopeful, but I seem to be a magnet for these kinds of people. How do I go about meeting normal people? So, going slow, and just realizing that there are a lot of highly problematic people in the world. They're out there. My video series, The Red Flags of a Narcissist, covers a lot of the signs. I'm going to be doing more videos on that. I'll be releasing one tomorrow on the silent treatment. So, just realizing the signs, like realizing kind of what does problematic behavior look like, and being okay enough to either bring it up with a person when we see it, or to walk away, kind of however you feel you need to handle that. So, but yeah, there's lots of them out there, and so here was a big aha moment I had. Was, for a long time, I really divided the world up into two different groups of people, like normal people and like abusive people. And then it dawned on me, because I was getting a lot of like, I didn't trust my judgment, right? So that's how I got tangled up with Steve, is I felt the red flags, right? But I doubted myself. I thought, well, maybe I have issues with men or commitment, and I've been through a lot, so there's a very solid chance that it's me. And so I began asking other people, asking friends and family, well, what do you think about this? And everybody thought, he's so wonderful, he's so nice, you know, you've got nothing to worry about. He's a good guy. And I set aside my better judgment, and I glossed over it because, in large part because it was all of the love bombing. It was the whirlwind. I wanted it to be true. I wanted it to be real. And I also really doubted my judgment. So when that relationship blew up, and it was the same, it was the double life, it was the nonsense, it was the lies, it was just the foolishness and ridiculousness, right? Then I realized, oh, wait a minute. Well, I think there's three groups of people out there. There's healthy people, there's normal people, and then there's abusive people. And so realizing that you're going to get different advice and feedback from each type of person and each type of group. So it's really helpful to kind of be able to identify what kind of group the person is in that you're talking to. And the only way that any of us can tell for sure, is to go slow, and to let their and to talk to them, right? To find out, like, well, what are their belief systems? And, um, you know, especially when we're dating, right? To talk to somebody and to see, where is their level of accountability with things, and where is their level of responsibility, and how do they talk about other people in their life, and have they done any like introspection, and or are they the perpetual victim, kind of like, what insight do they have into things. Now granted, a really good manipulative person can do a lot of BSing when it comes to that, but again, time will tell, like, time will tell. And also how you feel will tell. So even if a person giving great lip service and saying kind of everything, they're telling you, oh, I really messed things up with my ex-wife or my ex-husband, and this is what I did wrong. Your spidey sense is going to be going off, and you're going to get that. If you get a funny feeling about somebody, it's generally because there's something funny about them. So we don't tend to have those feelings for no reason. So just going slow, and it helps to meet with a person. So if you have people in your life, like, I would say, finding the like healthiest people that you have in your life. And if you're dating, if you're meeting a new person, to, you know, before you get too emotionally invested, to bring that new person around your friends or around those other healthy people that you have. So, and then listening and observing and seeing how are they reacting with this person, and what do your friends have to say, and not getting defensive, because again, it's easy for that cognitive dissonance to kick in, right? Where we really want this relationship so bad, and we're talking ourselves into it, and we're not listening to people that are saying, hey, I think this guy is kind of, or this girl or whatever is kind of weird, or I noticed this, or these are my concerns. To really slow down, especially if we're having concerns or if other people are having concerns. So, okay, Cupcake says, hi everyone, this is my first time here. I'm not sure if I should go no contact with my ex narcissist's boyfriend's son. My ex narcissist boyfriend's son. Okay. We had a wonderful relationship and I don't know how to handle it. My other question is what to do with the physical stuff from the relationship with my ex. So, yeah, that's really tough. It's really tough to know, whether or not to go no contact, especially with their children, especially if you really liked their children, right? I think you have to err on the side of what do you need to do in order to stay safe and sane. So if you're feeling particularly emotionally vulnerable, that continuing a relationship with his son is going to either put you in harm's way physically or in harm's way emotionally, or you run the risk of getting sucked back into this relationship, even if your ex has moved on, because they never really move on, right? Like, they tend to kind of circle around whenever they're bored or broke or lonely or horny, or kind of whenever they need something, that's when they circle around, right? So if you know I think you need to do what you need, what's best for you, and only you can answer that. But if the answer to that is that you don't feel comfortable, that you would be putting yourself at risk physically or emotionally by continuing to talk to the son, then I think there's your answer, right? So, like, you need to put, and I know that might sound selfish to some people, but you really do have to put yourself first. We have to break the pattern of sinking ourselves so that other people might swim. And it's unfortunate that this child is caught up in all of this, right? But it's terrible. I mean, it's part of it. It's just part of it, and it's really unfortunate. So, if depending on the age of the son, might want to write a letter, or even to call him and just say, I'm really sorry that your dad and I had this falling out, and that we broke up. This has nothing to do with you. And, you're a really neat guy. And I just want you to know that it has nothing to do with you, and that I care about you tremendously. And I wish you all the best in the world. Right. And then just kind of going your own way, and maybe down the road you could reopen something. But it's so tough because things get muddled really quickly, especially when there's children in the mix and an abusive person. So, what to do with all the physical stuff? I would say you could, I would get rid of it some way, shape, or form. You know, giving it to like a neutral third party. You could even consider contacting the non emergency police and saying, hey, I've got all this stuff. This was a really, not a good relationship, and I don't know what to do with it. Because that's the thing with the narcissist, you can't ever win, right? Like it's always, because if you were to get rid of it, then they're going to get upset that you got rid of it. If you were to keep it, then they can come back, and it's a way for them to potentially worm their way into your life. And no matter whatever you do, it's going to be wrong according to them, because they're out to create conflict, right? That's why, like, we can't win, because they want to create conflict, whereas we're trying to reach a solution. So you could see with, you know, again, like their intention is going to be to use this situation to create conflict. So trying to figure out a least conflict kind of way of getting rid of it, and that might be definitely keeping a paper trail. So if you're gonna text your ex, don't do a phone call, like text or send an email. If you have the stuff, you could say, I'm going to be gathering your things up this weekend. I'm going to be putting them, on the front porch at this time. I hope this time works for you. Can you please make arrangements? But again, realizing that everything that you do is going to be wrong because they're high conflict people, or arranging for the stuff to go to a third party, or if you know where his address is, shipping it to him, or something, but keeping a paper trail of everything, because they're drama and they're crazy, and you just don't know what they're going to do. So let's see. Kelly says, if you ignore them long enough, they will eventually stay away from you. Potentially. Generally. I mean, if you cut off their source of supply, right? So if they're looking for, food, clothing, sex, shelter, money, these kinds of things, right? If you deny them access to that, they're going to eventually move on. They're going to go find somebody else. A lot of them, though, but again, there's this percentage of them that have a hard time moving on, especially if they are very controlling people, and they just, if you're experiencing like stalking, or where you're scared, like these kinds of behaviors, I would take that stuff seriously, and I would again, talk to non-emergency police. I would definitely arm yourself, in kind of whatever way that you feel that you need to do. So yeah, it's not, it's high conflict people. So yep. Ambiguous Nomad says, Dana, I said that to my sister about my mother. It's always something. I can never do anything right. My sister told me, well, if I said things better and tried to explain myself, then conflict wouldn't happen. I told her that it was just an excuse for the abuse, and I'm happy I did it, even though it was tough to say. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, people don't understand that. They think that it takes two people to argue, and it doesn't. Not with a narcissist. With a narcissist, you can sit there and you can agree. Being in a relationship with a narcissist is like being in a hit and run accident. Like, it really, really is. Because things could be totally fine, and then out of left field, it's these wild accusations, it's them spinning things, it's they are looking to create conflict. They are not looking to create a solution. And so, or to work towards a solution. So if all of a sudden the communication just goes off the rails, right? Like, now you're kind of like lost in the bushes, and you're just being verbally or physically attacked. It's There's nothing that we did. Like, it's like they just had this break from reality, and now they're on the attack. This is just how their brain works. So there is no being logical about it. There is no being rational about it because you're not dealing with a logical or a rational person. And so I think a lot of us make the mistake of thinking like, well, if we can just explain to them that their behavior is hurtful or problematic or that we're not doing what they're accusing us of, right? If we can just get through to them, then that the behavior would change. But that's not the case. Like there's, it's, you know, it's kind of just like things for them. They are just taking a break from reality. Like things have short circuited in their brain and they're not here. Like we're not talking to the person that we're normally with, right? It's kind of just like this deep unconscious part of themselves. It's very, very, very strange. And it doesn't take two people to argue because a narcissist can argue by themselves. Like you can sit there and agree with every single thing that they're saying, and it's just going to feed fuel to the fire, and they will follow you around, and it's ranting and it's raving and it's accusing, and they don't let up until they're ready to let up, and there's no rhyme or reason for it, and it's hard to explain that to people that haven't lived it. So yep. Ambiguous Nomad says, I blamed myself for the longest time. I thought it was me. I tried to be rational and explain myself, and it just leads to more hurt. I've realized that now. Yeah, it's they are not in the moment. Like they are not here. It's like a break from reality, you know? It's just very strange. I If you've experienced it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you probably don't understand it all. So, Sayomi says, why are there such a high number of narcissists? 10% is a lot. Well, you know what, though, honestly, I think so. They say, they statistically, that there's probably about 3% of the population that's narcissists. That number is estimated to be low because they don't go to therapy, right? So they're not being tracked. And my guess is it's probably around 10%, maybe even a little bit higher than that. But I think it's, again, we all tend to be victims of victims. And so abuse and abusive behavior, and there's a wide variety of it, is been going on since the dawn of time. And this stuff is not taught. There's kind of this idea out there, I think, where people, I know I thought this for a long time, think, well, it's only people from like severely dysfunctional homes that go through abuse, but that's not true. Like, it's amazing that a person does not need to go through like a tremendous amount of trauma in order to develop, to get out of alignment with themselves, right? Like to develop poor boundaries and poor standards. It just even simply like not being taught to listen to your intuition and to not be taught about healthy boundaries and standards. So even like if you grow up in a great home, parents rarely like sit down and explain like healthy boundaries and standards. They might role model some of them, maybe, right? But odds are they probably didn't. So this whole concept of emotional health and respecting the individual and respecting ourselves, this is a really new concept. Like as a species, human beings, we haven't really had the luxury of exploring our highest and best self. I mean, for many centuries, it's been all about survival, right? Like we've gone through all kinds of diseases and wars and depressions and major events in history where people just haven't had the idea of self-respect or respecting other people was you didn't have time for that. Like there was work that had to be done and things, this is a luxury that we're now kind of evolving into. So so anyways, the point is there's a lot of people out there that have gone through a lot of different forms of trauma. In trauma's a spectrum, right? Like it ranges from, a little bit of trauma to intense amounts of trauma, but even a little bit of trauma can have that ripple effect. So it's important that we get as much of this stuff ironed out as we possibly can. Milt says, Dana, next drink out of a little blue thimble shaped just like your mug, just to make us go, hmm. I will see if I can find a little blue thimble. I know this is my, like, it really does look big. I don't know if it's this, maybe it really is this big and I'm just used to seeing it, but it does hold an awful lot of liquid. So Nick says, I think codependence is on the NPD spectrum. It's also known as covert narcissism on some websites. Yeah, codependency, and I'm going to get more into this in my series on codependency here, but um, I, so my kind of whole theory is that it's all about these buckets, right? Like all human beings are trying to get these buckets filled. Like that's how our brain works. That's how we evolve and emotionally mature and physically mature as human beings. It's getting those three buckets filled. And we get these three buckets filled generally in one of two ways. We either get them filled through taking, which is more of like the narcissistic way of doing it, right? Or we get the buckets filled through giving. And so those of us that are on more of like the codependent side of the spectrum, it's we're giving in order we're giving like love and time and money, and we're over giving is what it is, right? We're giving too much of ourselves. We're giving too much of excuses and justifications and our too much time and money and of ourselves, hoping that somebody else will fill this bucket for us, right? We're clinging on to these relationships because this other person's filling this bucket, right? Like this relationship is filling this bucket. Narcissists get these same buckets filled by taking, right? So they lie, they cheat, they steal, they manipulate, they're doing all of the same things. It's just we both have the same goal. We're just going about it in two very different ways. And so it's both disorders at the core of it. It's this kind of out of alignment with ourself, right? So and there's a spectrum on both ends because you know a little bit of narcissism isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, there's a lot of amazing things that have been done in the world by people that have been really headstrong and that have been real go-getters and, not saying that their way was necessarily the best way to do it, but there's been a lot of good that's come from that. There's been a lot of good that have come from people that have been over givers, right? So kind of like your Mother Teresa's of the world. So, but it's finding that balance. If it kind of gets too extreme either way, then it's really problematic. So and I think that's frankly it's kind of getting that back into alignment with ourself. That's the solution. And it's the solution for codependence and it's the solution for narcissists. The hard part, the challenge is with both groups of people is getting through to them because codependent people don't think that they have a problem. It takes an awful lot for us to realize, oh, hey, like maybe there's something going on there with us. And then with narcissists, they don't think they have a problem. So both groups of people aren't changing and their lives just aren't working, right? So it's really hard. It's really hard to see change. So what you're talking about on some websites, covert narcissism is also referred to as codependency. Sometimes, yes. I've heard the term inverted narcissism. I think Sam Vaknin invented that term, which I think is a fantastic term because it is. I mean, it's all kind of, there's, all of this goes together. I mean, to understand codependency is to understand narcissism, and you kind of can't have one without the other. So, it's dysfunction. I mean, generally, like codependency is also comes from deep dysfunction, right? Either real or perceived, and it's a person can have a traumatic childhood and they can become a narcissist, or a person can have a traumatic childhood and become codependent. And kind of the degree to which they become a narcissist or a codependent seems to kind of correlate to the degree of trauma that they have when they're a child. Again, real or perceived. So interesting stuff. Helene asks, Dear Dana, can alcoholism cause narcissism, or is it the other way around, that narcissists tend to abuse alcohol and drugs due to their personality? That's a great question. And drug, drug addiction and alcoholism, when a person gets caught up in that addiction, right? Their addiction takes over, and that addiction will do whatever it takes by any means necessary to get fed. So a person's behavior can be very narcissistic, and generally is very narcissistic if they're caught up in the throes of addiction. It's hard to tell if the person has more of a personality disorder, or if kind of what's causing their behavior. Is it personality disorder, or is it the addiction? You can't really tell until the addiction kind of clears up, and then you can see, okay, is this behavior still there? But yes, so it does tend to go both ways. So a lot of, because addiction of any kind, like problematic behavior of any kind, right? Like personality wise, or with spending, or with eating, or with drinking, or with drugs, problematic behavior as a whole tends to be a way for people to kind of numb out and to cope with trauma. Because healthy, balanced people don't do these things, right? Like they don't develop problematic coping skills. They develop healthy coping skills. So people that don't have that, are struggling with healthy coping skills develop unhealthy coping skills. And, I would say probably, I think the percentage is pretty high of people that do have personality disorders also tend to have addictions. I think it's kind of the same root cause, right? So there's a lot of trauma there. This trauma has caused personality disorders in them. It's also, it's just, trauma is like an internal volcano. I mean, if a person is dealing with all of this anger and hurt, it just seeps out of every pore, right? I mean, it is just, you can't bottle it. So it's coming out with addictions. It's coming out with like smoking, or with drinking, or with their weight, or with their spending, or it's everything about them just oozes, and depending on the severity, right? Like just oozes anger and hurt and frustration and all of this. So codependent people tend to have the same kind of stuff. It manifests in different ways. So I think a lot of codependent people tend to internalize more. So whereas narcissists tend to lash out, right? And they use other people as their verbal or physical punching bag, or maybe they're drinking and these kinds of things. A lot of codependent people tend to internalize it. So there's a lot more, instead of aggression, there's depression, right? So there might be like cutting, there might be drug use and alcoholism, and but a lot of like internal stuff. So just depression and suicidal tendencies and suicidal thoughts and those kinds of things. It's maladaptive ways of, we all cope based on the best ways we know how at the time. And when we know better, then we can do better, But again, like this stuff it's not taught. So, oh, Adrian says, if being addicted to Dana is narcissistic, I don't care. Well, that's cute. I'm flattered. Thank you. Ambiguous says, Dana, I feel like some codependents, myself included. Oh, well, losing the chat. Let me scroll up. Dana, I feel like some codependents, myself included, want to understand why relationships go the way they do and why it is so hard for them to assert themselves, thinking it's a personality thing. I struggled so much drowning myself to save others and just ended up hurt that once I came across it, it was like finally an explanation for all those dysfunctional relationships where I feel violated and stressed. So, um, yeah, I think a lot of, I think people in general, even those that are on the narcissistic side of the spectrum, because I think there is and we don't know, we don't know where the line is, right? Like where somebody is capable of having these aha moments and changing behavior and kind of when they're past that point of no return. And I think that's a very individualized thing, right? So, yeah, but I think a lot of codependent people, and probably some of those that are, on the narcissistic side of the spectrum, if they have those aha moments, it's a truly an aha moment. It's sort of like, oh, wow, okay, this is why my life hasn't been working. And things really start to click into place. But it's one of those things. It's, we could hear these terms time and time and time again, and we can go to therapy and we can do all these things, but we're not, like, we have to be at a certain level of like understanding and readiness, I think is really what it is, in order for us to be, for it to sink in. It's sort of like the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And there's a lot of truth to that. Like, it's just kind of one day you're like, oh, oh, you're just receptive to the message, and like you see it, and now you start seeing it everywhere, and you start finding all the right books and the right people, and things just start clicking, and it's all contributes to like your path of healing. It's weird how that happens, but it's true. So why is it so hard for codependent people to assert themselves? Well, I think if you kind of go back to the whole empty buckets theory, right? So if we have, let's say, if we grew up in a way where we were looking, we kind of grew up with the whole, we had to be the caretaker, right? So if you grew up with a parent who was an addict or an alcoholic or mentally ill, right? And we felt, or otherwise, or somehow abusive, that we felt that we had to take care of them, right? So it was sort of like we felt like we had to earn attention or affection or love. And so a lot of us kind of been walking around with this idea that we need to be needed. We're confusing being needed with love, and or that we have to earn their time. And so it's hard, right? It's hard to have a good boundary with somebody when it's reversed, right? Like, it's hard for us to be like, well, no, these are my boundaries and standards, if your dynamic is one that you don't feel like you can have boundaries and standards, that the other person is the one that has to approve of us, right? So if we're feeling like, especially if that bucket's low or empty, then we're not being discriminating, right? We're taking kind of whatever comes down the path that fills that bucket for us. So, but if we're looking towards other people, if we're needing their approval, and we're used to having to kind of work at being loved or work at being accepted, then that's the dynamic that we're going to keep repeating. Because to be in a healthy relationship where we aren't needed, right? We're wanted, but we're not needed. Those relationships can feel really flat, and like we don't really know what to do. So, people, we all tend to, it's kind of law of attraction stuff, but we all tend to date and befriend and do everything in life at the same level of our dysfunction or our function. So it's a, kind of a great way to tell where you are, where we are, is to look around, and what kind of job are you working out? What kind of, house are you living in? What kind of friends do you have, and what kind of relationships do you have? And and if we were to go with the assumption of, and I think there's a lot of truth to this, our external relationships are a reflection of our internal relationship, then what does that say? What does that say about us? So, if our friends are all messed up and dysfunctional and drama and crazy, then, and they have, when we have a very conflicted, high conflict relationship with them, then odds are we have a really high conflict relationship with ourselves. And it took me a long time to really see that. I really discounted that for a long, long time. I just really kind of thought like, oh, it's a bunch of nonsense. It's a bunch of psychobabble. I didn't give it the weight that it deserves. I really didn't see my part in things for a long time. I didn't see that, I had a dysfunctional relationship with myself. I didn't treat myself with value or with respect, to the extent that I needed to. I mean, I wasn't awful with it, but it wasn't to the extent that I needed. I didn't know what that meant. Like you hear words, right? Like you hear words like, "Oh, you got to love yourself." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love myself, sure." Like, what does that mean? I don't know. Um, I just like you have to kind of really tighten up those boundaries because really, like loving yourself and respecting yourself means going with your intuition. It means knowing what feels good to you and what feels bad to you, and it means knowing yourself. And once you know yourself, then it's the having boundaries and standards comes easy because you're paying attention to how you feel. So, Little Britches says, so Dana, how do we move past needing the excitement of being needed and settling for or being happy with that flat feeling of a normal relationship? You know, again, I think getting in alignment with yourself and paying attention to, because that feeling of being needed, right? Like that codependent people are often doormats. They're often called people pleasers, and they're often, um, you know, martyrs, right? They go above and beyond. If we realize we don't need to sink ourselves to save other people, that we are worthy, we are lovable, just the way we are, being imperfect and everything else, like just the way we are, that we're still very lovable, that we don't have to earn somebody's love. Once we get our self-love in alignment, right, and we're treating ourselves with value, we're honoring our boundaries and standards, we're paying attention to how we feel. When we're doing those things, the rest of the stuff really falls into place, and it doesn't take a lot of effort. It takes practice. It takes practice learning to say no and being okay with saying no and setting boundaries and realizing that we don't have to be a people pleaser. We don't have to make our lives all about other people, that it's okay to have wants and needs. It's okay to say no. It's okay to, we don't have to walk on eggshells. And the healthier we get, it's kind of this evolution. Like the healthier we get, our environment changes, right? Because it's everything kind of, we have this vibration, or everything, like water seeks its own level, right? So if one area of our life improves, then everything else is going to eventually improve. And so, if you're experiencing change in one area, eventually it will kind of transfer over to all areas, and then our life just continues to either go up or it goes down, depending on kind of what our behaviors are. And the healthier we get, the more a healthy relationship will feel good. It won't feel flat. It doesn't feel good in the moment because that's not where we are, like vibrationally, right? That's not where our water level is right now. But the more we raise our water level, the more then that healthy relationship is going to feel really good. So, ooh, there's a bug. Sorry. Teresa says, Dana, I was married to a sadistic narcissist. My youngest daughter behaves just like him, with gaslighting, the projection, the smear campaign, the need to hurt me emotionally. She has been alienated from me. Does this mean she's a sadistic narcissist too? Possibly. I mean, it sounds like she's got a lot of the same behaviors, and you know, we tend to take on the behaviors that were role modeled for us, right? So if that was the kind of stuff that she was role modeled from your ex, then it makes sense that she's going to have a lot of the same kind of personality stuff. And it's incredibly unfortunate, but it's really hard. I think it's almost next to impossible for like a deeply dysfunctional person to raise a healthy, well-adjusted, functional person. Like it just, the damage that they do is it's, I mean, it's generational. It's just, it takes a long time to do that level of repair. I mean, intensive therapy can definitely help, but again, it's convincing other people that they have a problem is the hard part, right? Because none of us tend to think that we're the problem. It's always somebody else that's the problem. So, okay, guys, I need to call it a night here pretty soon. So, thank you everybody so much for joining the live stream and for being here and for just everything. Just all your feedback, all your support, all your insights are just phenomenal. If you're looking to read the books that I had mentioned, or you're looking to participate, or you want to read my notes on the books that I had mentioned, if you go to my website, and I will link to it down below, it's narcissistsupport.com, and you look for the tab that says book club that has links to my notes and the discussions and the books. So that is that. And yes. So good night. Good night. Oh, Elise is here. Hi, Elise. And so good night, guys. We'll see you next Wednesday. We do these live streams, as most of you guys know, every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And they kind of go until I have to go to bed. So there's not a set time. This is just very, very, very casual. So again, thank you everybody for being here. As always, you guys, you're not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care. Lots of love to you, and I will see you next week. Okay? Bye.